Okie doke. Let's go ahead and get to this Cornel West Jimmy Dore interview. I'm actually going to start 6 minutes in because we already covered that first part on RBN earlier today. And then there's another part I want to get to that we didn't get a chance to get to earlier today. Now, let me go ahead and scoot this up here. Let's get into it. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and hit that like button. That helps me with the algo. Thank you very much. Before we dive into this, I want to start off by saying this. I want to continue to reiterate this. There is no hero coming to save you. There's no one person that is coming to save you. That's not Biden. That's not Trump. That's not Dr. West. That's not Dr. Shiva. That's not Marianne. That's not RFK Jr. We have to save ourselves. We have to work within our communities and organize and help each other. The Black Panthers knew this. The Black Panthers did not sit around crossing their fingers and hoping on some political leader to come in and save the people in their community. So I continue to stress that. And I'm saying this because I already saw people say they're sad, they're depressed, they're heartbroken by what they saw last night. And I'm going to make it very clear to you. I'm not sad. I'm not depressed. I'm not heartbroken. But when CJ asked me earlier today, how do I feel after what I saw last night? I'm disappointed. And I'm going to talk about both sides. Both sides. So I'm not sad. I'm not depressed because I'm not relying on a politician to come and save me. When this election cycle is over, everybody goes back. A lot of people go right back to sleep until the next election cycle, and then you come alive again. You can't hibernate during the off season. The work on the ground has to continue. We have to still organize and work with people in our communities and help each other. We need to be working together doing community gardens and not sitting back crossing our fingers and thinking one of these politicians is going to come and save me. No one is coming to save you. You have to save yourself. I don't have heroes. I have people that I admire in my life, but I don't have no damn heroes. Let's get into this interview.
Here's another tweet from Nick. He says the same professional managerial class gaslighters want us to take it easy on Bernie. They use civility politics as a weapon so they can comfortably sell out. The working class must reject this and start holding these people accountable for selling us out. So Bernie has sold us out, and I don't need you to call him a sellout or anything. That's fine. But I do want to see, this is your response, because Bernie was asked about your campaign, and he said it shouldn't happen, and he's against it, and he's endorsing Biden, and of course that is just garbage. And so this is how you responded.
And you know, even in love, people have deep disagreements about these things. But I think again, he's fearful of the neo-fascism of Trump.
So when my what I would say to you here, and this is a big point, and I'm trying to impress upon you going forward.
I just want to pause here for just a second, because there's a piece, if you didn't see that interview from the Breakfast Club, there's a piece that comes right after that where Cornel West, I think I played it on here, where Cornel West actually says that he's upset for Bernie Sanders to tell a lie. He said, "You going to tell that lie about Joe Biden and the economy?" Like, he says it better than I do. I'm sorry. But that's the part that comes after that. So I'm just telling you that in the event you think that's all that is, that's where the breaking point stops in that Breakfast Club interview. But let's continue.
That when you do that, you sound a little bit like Joe Biden. And what you're doing is you're giving a pass to Bernie Sanders and anybody else for voting lesser of two evils. So you're endorsing the Democrats' message in their campaign. And so now people can dismiss your candidacy and say, well, we got to worry about the neo-fascism of Trump, as if Joe Biden isn't worse, which he is. He's a bigger fascist. And he just crushed a union strike on the railroad, which is the definition of fascism. He's now trying to saber rattle with two nuclear powers, nuclear war, nothing more important than that. And what he's doing in Ukraine, you know exactly what he's doing, right? So he's the worst warmonger in the world. 300,000 Ukrainians have already been slaughtered in this proxy war that was provoked by NATO, which you know. So when do you think that when you say that about, when you call Donald Trump a neo-fascist and you don't say that about Joe Biden, what do you say when I tell you that you're undercutting your own campaign and you are propping up the Democratic message, which is that they are the lesser of two evil and you have to vote for Joe Biden so we don't have fascism? By the way, we already have fascism. As we all know, the fascism is the joining of corporate and government to screw the worker. And that's exactly what Joe Biden, the Democrats, and Pete Buttigieg did. And so they will keep doing it, and they're not stopping it. And they're also for censorship, which is the hallmark of fascism. So this idea that Donald Trump is more of a fascist than Joe Biden undermines your own campaign. There's no doubt about that. And so what I would encourage you to stop doing that. What do you say back?
So let me chime in here. So I had this conversation with Dr. West. I know Nick and CJ and Rome also had this conversation with Dr. West as well about in reference to comparing Joe Biden to Donald Trump. And the way that I look at it is like this. There's overt and there's covert, right? I felt like Trump was more overt. He would say the quiet part out loud, whereas Joe Biden may not necessarily say it out loud, but he was doing it either by legislation or through other people. But they're still both at that same level in reference to when we talk about like fascism, that kind of stuff. But I think where the focus needs to be is more so on corruption, because I think instead of comparing, and I did this too, when I talked to Dr. West, I was comparing the two. And I think the thing is, if you're running as a third party candidate, you're running against Trump and Joe Biden. Well, presumably Trump, right? It most likely looks like it's going to be Trump. You're running against Donald Trump and Joe Biden. You're not just running against Joe Biden. You're not just running against Donald Trump. Both of them are corrupt. And this is why we keep saying, this is why you guys will hear Eric, my producer, say oftentimes, you got to focus on the corruption. We got to continue to focus on that type of thing. But I did explain this to Dr. West, that Joe Biden is also fascist. So this is where myself and Dr. West, we disagree on this. I still think that Joe Biden is fascist. And I think that if Dr. West doesn't see that, that's unfortunate. But basically, if you look at the policies, if you look at the legislation, and you look at the things that Joe Biden's done, I'm not even just talking about in his past. I'm talking about since he's been president. If you look at the things that he's done by legislation, Joe Biden is still fascist. But let him respond.
No, we deeply disagree on that, though, brother. I don't think, and this is where I disagree with Nick too, that, and I appreciate your advice here, cast in a respectful way, but we do, and I disagree with Brother Nick on this too, that I just got back from Mississippi. You know that. You know what the Jenkins and Parkins, the two brothers brutalized by the police. There at the church, the Klan still running wild, not just with votes, but terrorizing Black folk. The Goon Squad finally got caught by the two lawyers, Brother Malik and Brother Trent. Now, what does that mean? That means that when you talk about fascism, you're talking not just about the rule of big money, not just the rule of big military, not just the rule of corporate power, so that it's oligarchic in essence, but you're also talking about dictatorial rule, no elections, the elimination of dissident voices, and then the scapegoating of the most vulnerable, which it could be immigrants, it could be workers, it could be Black people, Jews, Arabs, and so forth. See, with under Biden, what you have is a fascist dimension domestically, especially against Black folk and others. You and I, the very fact that we're having this dialogue without being eliminated overnight, a fascist regime could completely call into question with the use of arbitrary power. That's what happens in the mass incarceration regime vis-a-vis poor Black people and others.
But when we talk about, so when Dr. West brings up the mass incarceration regime, again, I think about Joe Biden, because Joe Biden is the one who wrote the crime bills. And I say bills is plural because there were multiple bills. I think about that. I think about Joe Biden, like he was the one who created the legislation or co-created the legislation to make it possible for the mass incarceration to increase, particularly of Black men. And again, that's taking Black men out of the home and leaving the single mothers with the child. So you guys see how this didn't just happen under Biden, but also under Reagan. Think about the war on drugs. When we go into that, and we talk about that. So you got the legislation to back the war on drugs, like the war on drugs, the legislation, all those things go together. So then it's one thing for Ronald Reagan to say, we got to get a war on drugs. We're going to get those people off the street. But then when you have the legislation in hand that basically says an ounce of this is, this much maximum sentence time compared to where it was before. Now you're not just taking the Black man out the home, and we're not going to say all those people were guilty either. Let's keep it real. Now you're just not just taking the Black man out the home, but you're taking him out the home and you're putting him in jail for 20 years, preventing him from even having a chance to come back and raise his child. That was on purpose. So it is very important that we cannot forget that. We cannot forget that. And I said it before, you got to punch Joe Biden in the face. Like excuse me, YouTube, I'm speaking, not seriously, but if you're in the ring, you got to knock Joe Biden out. If you're in the ring, you got to knock Trump out. But the biggest challenge, I think, right now is going to be Biden, because a lot of the people that did support Cornel West, Democrats, right, that came from like the Bernie Sanders movement. But you got to knock him out. Again, YouTube, I'm not being serious. So let me just continue.
Right. Yeah. So that is the fascist dimension. Similarly, so in terms of militarism abroad. So that there's fascist elements, my brother, there's fascist dimensions. But with Trump, when you have calling into question transfer of power and so forth, that is not the same thing. And so that doesn't undermine my campaign at all. The campaign's about truth.
100% undermines your campaign.
So I want to pause here and say something else that I should have said in the very beginning. I noticed from the very beginning of the interview, the energy was off. From the very beginning of the interview, I noticed the energy was off. I didn't feel like it just, I don't know. It was just vibes, just a feeling that I got, right? And it just, I don't know. To me, when I was watching it from the very beginning of the interview, and I've seen Cornel West and Jimmy Dore obviously interact before. I've seen Cornel West was part of Force the Vote. Let's all remember the Force the Vote town hall and all that kind of stuff. This was not the same. This was not like the same feeling that it was back then. So from the very beginning of the interview, the energy for me was just off. And I had to ask myself, is some of this personal? Not just on the policies, not just on the issues, not just on the rhetoric of the campaign, but from the very beginning, it's like you sense tension. And so I had to ask, is some of it personal? Let me continue.
100%. You're shooting yourself right in the dick before you even start. So that's just bad. You're getting bad advice. I don't know who's advising you, but they're giving you horrible advice.
January. I'm a free man.
Okay.
Brother.
So January.
But I want to hear your argument. As to how Biden is more fascist than Trump. Just lay it out right quick.
See, this is where I would have just let this go. Look, so we're 11 minutes in, right? So I felt like there was too much time spent on that particular topic. I really do. They're both corrupt. That's just how I see it. You go in the ring, you knock out one, you knock out the other, you keep it moving. But the back and forth of so-and-so's more fascist than this person, so-and-so's more fascist than that person. I was like, Let's talk about policy. Now, I know where Cornel West stands on policy because when I've interviewed him, asked him, it's also on like his website. I already know that stuff. But for some of the people that were watching last night, and I could tell from the comments in the chat, for some of the people watching last night, they did not know. They did not know about the policy positions. So I wish it would have gone a little bit more there instead of this back and forth about who's fascist and who's not fascist.
Well, I'll tell you right now, the reason why the deep state Russia-gated Trump was because he wouldn't bomb enough to calm them down. So he wouldn't do enough bombing. The reason they impeached him because he wouldn't ship arms to Nazis in Ukraine, and he was against that. So that's
are you defending Trump as somehow being a person who is? I don't understand. I don't stand your argument at this point, though, man. What are we talking about?
Okay, so there's.
I want to understand what the content of your argument is. Because one can, in fact, bring critique to bear on the system as a whole with the two corporate wings, but somehow, what do you say to trans and gays and lesbian brothers and sisters in terms of their rights? So
that's again, Joe Biden is.
So that part right there, So that part right there, I did explain to Dr. West that, yes, even when it comes to the social issues and including the LGBTQ issue, yes, obviously the Republican Party is more overt about it. But I also explained that there were Democrat politicians who voted for other politicians like Nancy Pelosi. They all got in line, voted for other politicians that were also opposed to a woman's right to choose. It's been on both sides. That's the thing. Yes, I totally get it. Like when it comes to policy position, Republican Party may be more against like woman's right to choose, right? But even that's starting to change because even now there are some Republicans that are saying, well, maybe I feel a little bit different about that now. So, I mean, the thing is like, I just don't understand why. Let me go on.
Responsible for the mass incarceration, not Donald Trump. Who is more responsible for black and brown people being locked up and America being the largest penal colony in the world? Is it Donald Trump or would it be Joe Biden? By the way, this conversation is a loser for your campaign.
That felt personal to me. That felt somewhat personal. And I think, like, I don't know, man. Like, that's why I said, like, I just felt disappointed, like, watching this interview on both sides.
Sitting here trying to make the argument.
It could be a loser for you, too, though.
Trying to make the argument.
You trying to make the case that somehow the Democrats are more fascist than the Republicans. The fascism cuts across the board.
But that's not how you say it, though. You say it's only Donald Trump. You don't say it cuts across the board. You call Joe Biden milquetoast, and you call Donald Trump a fascist.
So this part here, I think Jimmy is correct here because I think the message, the way it is delivered, has not been delivered that way. Because let me make this clear, and this is what I would say to Dr. West in reference to this particular subject. When you say that one is milquetoast and the other is fascist, the one that you refer to as milquetoast gives the impression to people that that person is better than Donald Trump. So that's the person that they should support. You're not telling people they should support that person, but that's what people will hear when you say that. And same thing, vice versa, because we got to be clear. We got to do both sides. Same thing, vice versa. If you say that Trump is better than, Biden or whatever, and you say that, Biden is that sends people the message that, oh, Trump is better than Joe Biden, so we got to support Biden. The problem is when you're running as a third party candidate, you're running against both. You're running against the Democrat and the Republican. So you got to call both of them out, and you have to give people the impression that neither one of them is better than the other. And that's why you're running in the race. This is the same thing I said in reference to Vivek, because Vivek keeps saying Donald Trump was the best president of my generation. All right, cool. Why are you running? You see, this is why you have to be careful with the so-and-so be careful with that. Because then people will say, well, if that's the case, if you're telling me so-and-so is lesser evil than this person, then why should I support your campaign? That says to people, I might as well just support Joe Biden. So you have to call them both out equally. This is something, if you go back to 2016, this is something I think Jill Stein was really good at, calling both of them out. No, Hillary is not lesser of such and such. No, Trump is not lesser of such. They're both corrupt. And that's why you should support my campaign. So that's something that has to be done. So you're not
saying that Joe Biden is a fascist, really?
I said there's fascist dimensions to the Biden project. You're absolutely right.
It's but like you're campaigning for Joe Biden almost when you're doing this. That's what it sounds like.
Ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
But that's what I'm not saying you are doing that. I'm saying that's what it sounds like.
What it sounds like to you. That's what it sounds like to you. And you got a right to be wrong. You got a right to be right. It sounds like to you. But it doesn't sound like that to a whole host of others at all, though, brother. Not.
So the part that I'm confused by here, the message, it sounds like you're campaigning for Joe Biden. I actually feel like, isn't that the case also for RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson? Because, and I say this because both of them running through the Democratic Party, both of them are on record saying they're not going to run a mean-spirited campaign against Joe Biden. I told you guys that's really weird to me because he'll run a mean one against you, or the media will. So why wasn't that same rhetoric used towards, you see what you guys understand what I'm saying? So I think that's the thing, is like both of them on record say they won't run a mean-spirited campaign. Cornel West didn't say he won't run a mean-spirited campaign, but I do feel like all three of them are still not willing to take off the gloves when it comes to Joe Biden. And I think you really have to be willing to do that.
Okay. All right. Again, I'm saying this out of love for you because I do have deep love for you. I have deep respect for you. And we agree on almost everything except the message of your campaign, right? That's the only thing. I would hope it would become even more focal. Well, let me just put it this way.
But are you suggesting that the message should be that Biden is a greater fascist than Trump? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that you should talk about fascism or any of that stuff. I think you should.
No, fascism is very real. I think you don't think fascism is real in the country?
We're living in it. We're living in fascism.
But I'm talking about escalating in terms of intensity.
It has since Biden became president. It certainly has escalated in intensity. They've censored everybody. They've crushed unions. They've started another war, and now they're saber rattling with 2 nuclear powers. I don't know how I don't know how worse it could get. And by the way, he still hasn't let people out of prison. He still hasn't given student loan. He's still denying us health care. He's an enemy of the worker and a tool of military-industrial complex in Wall Street. There's no bigger fascist in the country than Joe Biden. The reason why black and brown people are locked up, again, isn't because of Trump. It's because of brother Biden. And Joe Biden is proud of that. He brags about that. He brags about the crime bill, and he will never apologize for it. So I'm just letting you know that I really want your campaign to pick up traction. This is the opposite way to do it. Who's ever advising you sounds like an infiltrator.
But why do you keep saying advise me?
There was too much time spent on this part. In my opinion, I felt like it was too much, like, I don't know.
Thinking for myself, brother. I'm a
okay. I don't mean to insult
man.
you. That's not
just a question of advising.
Okay.
I don't ask who's advising you. You thinking for yourself. You're a free man too, aren't you?
You're right. You're right. Okay. I was trying to put it in a nice way.
I use that kind of language, my brother. You want to be respectful.
I'm trying to be respectful. That was my.
I appreciate it. Okay. I know it look like it's hard sometimes, but I appreciate it. But we just have disagreements on these things.
Again,
if I undermine the campaign for you, then you're free to have your own view and vision.
Okay.
And people are free to listen to you and be persuaded or not. And I've got mine. I'm listening for your insight. Absolutely right. No doubt about that.
So let me just say this. So the point of running a third-party campaign is to offer an alternative to the 2 major parties, to bring together disaffected members of those parties, along with independents and others who feel alienated from the political system as it exists. And the best way to do this is by running on economic issues that unite us, but which neither major party is willing to address because they're both beholden to the same powerful corporate interests. The Democratic Party long ago abandoned the working class in favor of beating the drum on cultural issues, and now that's all the Democrats have to run on. So if voters are looking for a party running on trans rights and calling Donald Trump and his supporters white supremacists, they can already vote for Democrats. The role of a third party is to focus not on the identity politics that divide us, but on core economic issues that unite us along class lines, like Christian Smalls did at Staten Island. Do you think he led with LGBTQ trans rights and white supremacy, or do you think he organized along class lines?
So I want to interject here. That's not what Cornel West is leading with. We've gone over Cornel West's campaign website on this show multiple times with Cornel West present. That's not what Eric, if you could go ahead, could you pull up that campaign, the Cornel West campaign website? Thank you. That's not what he's leading with. And Cornel West has done a number of interviews where he talks about, in fact, every interview he did with me, what did we talk about? The economic system. We talked about the inflation. We talked about, the prices. We talked about the wars. We went through that entire platform that he had, not once, but twice. So it's not just, he's not leading with, I'm only going to run on these social justice issues. That's actually not the case. And I have it now, and I'll go ahead and pull it up. So if you look at the platform, thank you. The first thing that you see is dismantling the empire. There's nothing here. I don't have time to read everything, but this talks about the military bases, cutting back the military. That includes getting rid of NATO. We've went through all of this when he was on the show, withdrawing foreign aid to Egypt, Israel, and any other countries violating the human rights of subjugated peoples. Number one is dismantling the empire. This is something that I would have liked to hear about last night. Like, again, I know, but for some of the viewers, telling by the comments in the chat, they did not know. They're like, what is he running on? What are the policies? Like, what are these kind of things? So number one is dismantling empire. I don't see those social issues, the culture war, even addressed in the first topic. Number two is unleashing democracy. This is where he mentions Medicare for all. He talks about ending poverty and homelessness, quality education, free college tuition, all these things that come from the Bernie campaign, decriminalization of drugs. He goes into demilitarize the police, abolish cop city. You see all these things. This is where he goes into reparations, unjust treatment of Black people. Then he gets into securing rights for LGBTQ and trans people. But the number one thing that he leads with on the campaign website is dismantling the empire. So again, this is something I think people should have seen last night. And then there's also saving the planet. And that's when he gets into the fossil fuel industry and getting rid of them and the corporate greed. So I don't understand. People should have saw this last night, in my opinion. I'll get back into the interview. Alrighty.
That's what we have to do. You have to organize, meet people where they are. So what is your plan to organize along class lines? Or are you going to keep talking about white supremacy and all those identity politics, which are there, not from the ground up, from the top down, to make sure we stay divided? What is your plan to organize along class lines?
Let me pause here for a second, because I think this is where there seems to be a disagreement. When you organize along class lines, and a lot of times people want to bring up the Black Panthers, but I want to make something very clear, and I have a clip I'm going to show you to prove that as well. When I say, to be very clear, when I say you meet people where they're at first, right? So you meet them on the class issues first, but you also meet them on the racial issue as well. Those of us at RBN, you have to remember, we are coming from a point of Marxism. And there is no one or the other. I've told you multiple times on this channel, class is race and race is class. The majority of Black Americans are working class. And we can't just say, I'm only going to focus on class and I have no racial issues that I deal with. That's not true. It's both. When you look at the universal programs that Bernie Sanders talked about so much, the healthcare, education, the criminal justice system, we're at the bottom. When you look at the healthcare issue in this country, Black people are at the bottom. Whether we have Medicare for all or not, and we have to fix that issue. Look at the rate that Black women die from childbirth in this country. When you look at the education system, we're at the bottom. When you talk about the criminal justice system, we're at the bottom, guys. And that's what people have to understand. We're the ones that struggle with criminal justice. We're the ones that struggle to pay for bail. So some of the people that are sitting there in jail may not even be guilty. All those people aren't even guilty, guys. Some of them are sitting there because they can't afford to pay cash bail. That tags it back into the class issue. So we can't separate the two. Let me let Cornel West answer.
Well, I appreciate again the clarity and candor of what you have to say. We have profound disagreements, brother. When I organize around white supremacy, I'm not making some utilitarian calculation. I'm speaking as a Black man who comes out of a tradition that's been terrorized and traumatized by white elites. And that does not in any way mean it takes me away from class issues. Class issues are crucial. Class issues are fundamental. But it doesn't mean that I'm putting up with white supremacy. One of the problems is that you get too many folk who want to talk class, and can't say a mumbling word about white supremacy, police brutality. Can't say a mumbling word hardly. Or when they do say it, you call it identity politics as if it's not connected to class. I'm hitting these head on. I'm standing with the workers when it comes to strikes. I'm standing with the workers when it comes to greedy bosses. I'm standing with the workers when it comes to obsession with profits and the needs not in any way being satisfied. But I'll never for a minute be silent or not raising my voice in terms of vicious treatment of Black people, indigenous people, gay brothers, lesbian sisters, or trans. It's not an either or. And that's right. Where you and I have a deep, profound disappointment. So if I see, for example, if I watch your show and I notice you hardly say a mumbling word about white supremacy because it's some kind of identity politics and I'm against it, but I don't want to talk about it. I only want to talk about what people hold in common. Well, Black people are not going to hold it in common if you don't say a word about white supremacy, but maybe some of your white friends will. So who are you talking about? You're talking about in common. Are you talking about just a majority or what, my dear brother? I will never, ever in a million years not talk about vicious legacies of white supremacy, male supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, and others. But class will always be very much at the center. What brings you and I together is what? Our fundamental solidarity with working classes, not just here, but around the world. But oftentimes when I hear about your show and you say, well, you know, these identity politics issues get in the way. No, it's 100%. Not getting in the way. They're not getting in the way.
100%. They're used.
No. So the thing is this, and I have to say this, Dr. West, you got to remember where Dr. West comes from. Dr. West was a part of both Bernie Sanders campaigns, and Bernie Sanders campaigns focused on what? Those universal policies that he felt that everybody should have. But even when it came to the racial issue, even Dr. West told Bernie Sanders, why don't you agree with the reparations issue? They had that discussion. We've had this discussion with Dr. West on this show. And that was one place where Bernie Sanders wasn't willing to do that, because Bernie Sanders believed that if you implemented those universal programs, that you would lift all boats. Problem is, you lift all the boats, but there are still some people at the bottom. There is a difference between equality and equity. And some of you don't want to hear that. Some of you only want to hear what's going to make you feel comfortable. And I'm here to tell you, I'm not that person. So if you're afraid to feel uncomfortable, maybe this is not for you. But there is a difference between equality and equity. And when it came to that, the equity still was not there. So what people have to understand is, where does Dr. West come from? Dr. West wrote a book called Race Matters. Dr. West has been on the front lines protesting and marching and fighting with Black people for decades, before I was even born. That's where he comes from. He should not have to put that in a closet somewhere and ignore it and only focus on the economic issues. Yes, you have to talk about both. But what I've been hearing from people, particularly on social media, they're saying, don't talk about race at all. No, Dr. West is a Black man living in the United States. And that's not something that he should have to tuck and hide away in a closet to make people feel comfortable.
So the Democrats, that's all they have to run on. And when you say that stuff, you just sound like a Democrat because that's all they have. So if
exactly
you
wrong.
need,
if to talk about the dignity of black people in the face of vicious white supremacy makes me sound like a Democrat, you got the wrong earplug.
Okay,
you're not listening clearly. Because if you can't hear the critique of Wall Street, if you can't hear the critique of militarism, if you can't hear the critique of the foreign policy in Ukraine, and all you can hear when they talk about white supremacy is identity politics, then something's wrong with your earplug, though, brother. Something's wrong with you. Okay. We just have deep disagreement with that. But
it's disappointing.
It is what it is. You are profoundly disappointing in that sense. But if I still love you, brother.
I still love you too. I still love you too. I know you. I know you. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I'm talking about having a campaign. I'm not. There's a okay. So.
But the campaign is not about utilitarian calculation either. I don't look at black people like a utilitarian calculation. I can't say nothing because these people over here somehow are alienated. I'm telling the truth. I'm fighting for justice. And if people feel as if to talk about white supremacy is alienating, then they're going to be alienated. I'm talking about my mama. I'm talking about my daddy. This ain't no abstract dialogue about politics in the Machiavellian sense.
And I also want to add here, too, that I think some people are not aware of. Dr. West's campaign is not a traditional campaign. He's explained this very, very clearly when he came on the first time to talk about his campaign. It's more of a movement, so to speak. So I think if Jimmy's probably thinking about traditional, sorry, something happened with the wheel of my chair got stuck. Jimmy's probably thinking about like traditional, the traditional presidential campaigns. Dr. West is trying to create more of a movement, so to speak. So I think it's different from what's expected. Jimmy looks disappointed. I think also Dr. West looked disappointed. Like watching this last night, it just made me feel just disappointed. Like I don't know, man. We're going a little bit more here.
Not at all,
so
my brother.
When Bernie caught,
we marched together for class politics. We marched together because that's real. But if you think that talking about white supremacy is just identity politics, we got deep disagreement. That's all. So I'm sorry to go on, and you're very kind to let me go.
No, go right ahead. No, go right ahead. I don't. And honest, everything I'm saying here coming from my heart. I want your campaign to succeed, and I want you to have the strongest campaign possible. But Bernie caught on because he would always, if he was given a cultural question or an identity politics question, he would always bring it back to class and economics. And it doesn't. Well, here I was.
Well, Bernie Sanders, not in 2020. When Bernie Sanders ran in 2016, he focused more on the corruption, right? Because he was running against Hillary Clinton. He focused more on the corruption and the billionaires. And you heard him talk about that a lot. When Bernie ran in 2020, a lot of his rhetoric was, we got to win against this racist, sexist Donald Trump. Look it up. How many times did Bernie Sanders say that? And I'll tell you right now, I was at his rally here in Boston, at Boston Common, and he led with that throughout the speech. Even Bernie changed that around. So did I get to the part about
talking to one of Bernie's campaign managers? And this is what he said. Yes, I personally agree white supremacy is one of the causes. But if I lose two potential allies because they roll their eyes and stop listening before I get to their concerns, I've already lost. The civil rights advancements, women's rights, the environmental movement, they didn't happen because people like my dad voted Democrat because that stuff mattered to them. It happened because Democrats appealed to them on economic issues. And a lot of the Democrats they voted for because of economics also happened to vote for that other stuff. And it doesn't work in the inverse. So I'm just giving that to you.
No, I understand. But you can see again how I disagree. Keep in mind, bro. Civil rights movement was not because of white folk doing X or Y. It was because there was a social movement led by black people in the South that was multiracial, but led primarily by black folk. And neither party would have done anything without that social movement.
100% right. You're 100%.
But see, why did Dr. West say that? This is the part I think both Jimmy and Dr. West need to hear. Why did Dr. West say that? Dr. West said that about the movement because Dr. West is running a movement. not just a campaign. We talked about this and he said, yes, I'm running for president, but I'm also running. This is a movement. That's why he brought up the civil rights movement. That's why he said, look at what we did here and there, you know? So it's not a traditional campaign. Let me go back in. Sorry. Did I get to the other part yet? I don't know if I got
Obama. He's got a heterogeneous, diverse group. And I can speak my language of truth and justice as it connects to capitalism, imperialism, white supremacy, male supremacy, transphobia, whatever it is. And there's going to be some people who listen, and there's going to be some people who don't. But this is not just a question of political calculation and Machiavellian reflection, brother. This is about the quest for truth and justice. You got to be real. You got to be authentic. I'm not listening to consultants who tell me to use this particular kind of language with this group and this kind of language with that group. That is the essence of managerial bourgeois politics. I reject it.
So I heard you say one time that someone asked you that same question. Why don't you call Joe Biden a fascist, but you call Donald Trump a fascist? And one time you said that it was because Donald Trump criminalizes and demonizes his political opponents. And that's what fascists do. Well, of course, now they've been trying to criminalize and put in jail Donald Trump, Joe Biden's #1 political opponent, just like they did in Brazil and Pakistan. And so the global elite is doing this to anybody, and they'll.
Let me pause this for a second. I'm going to fast forward. This goes into the Cop City discussion, but Jimmy reads for a long time. So I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get to the question. Okay, here we go.
That's exactly what they're doing to Donald Trump. That's exactly what they'll do to you. That's exactly what they'll do to Bernie Sanders. That's exactly what they'll do to me. They'll do to anybody who is a threat to the establishment. And so
let me get a word in. Let me get a word in.
So I'm going to let you. So I just want you to. So
absolutely.
Go ahead. Take it where you will.
I'm very glad that you're zeroing in on the struggle to shut down Cop City. I'm in deep solidarity with them. We're working together in the coming weeks, virtually and so forth. But there's a logical fallacy.
Let me ask a question here in reference to Cop City. This is a question. I haven't seen this yet, but if they have, let me know. Have Marianne Williamson or RFK Jr. or Joe Biden said anything about Cop City? Do they support Cop City? Are they against Cop City? I'm just curious. Because so far, I haven't seen it.
See a rational gap in your attempt to compare freedom fighters against a vicious system in the name of everyday folk in ghettos, in hoods, and working class communities against the police versus Trump. Trump, I'm not in solidarity with Trump. I want him to have a fair trial. I'm not in solidarity with Trump. Simply because they use the same law against courageous, visionary freedom fighters against police brutality and police murder versus the same law against a gangster like Trump doesn't put Trump on a spectrum with freedom fighters, brother, at all. It doesn't put him on a spectrum at all. That's the fundamental difference between you and I in this case. But I'm glad you're talking about shutting down Cop City, because we know it's planned to be in a number of other cities as well. When I'm in Mississippi, it was a goon squad. The goon squad is shot through cities across the country. We saw it in Memphis, it's in Atlanta, it's in Chicago. But the idea of you recognizing that the same weaponization against these courageous freedom fighters is somehow on a spectrum with Trump, I radically reject that. I want a fair trial, but I think he's probably done a number of things that warrants a serious fair trial with him going to jail, but we shall see.
So you're for prosecuting the last president after he loses an election. You think that's a good way to run a democracy? Because again, you don't see the connection that this is the donor class criminalizing anybody who they don't like, and they'll do it to you, and they'll do it to Bernie, and they'll do it to anybody else. And so you don't have to like Donald Trump. I don't at all. But I see what the game is being played here, and you don't.
I think what Jimmy was trying to do here was compare that RICO case, which we talked about earlier, to how they're using that against Donald Trump, and they're now using that also against the protesters I told you about in reference to trying to stop Cop City. I think the difference is, though, we went over that earlier tonight, and I told you they're trying to get them for things like handing out flyers, like things like that. right? So I get what Jimmy was trying to say, but at the same time, I think I would have phrased it differently.
See that game being played? You don't see this game, really?
I see the game, the same law against the Proud Boys. I wanted a fair trial. I wanted to make sure they're treated, but at the same time,
they're doing
the fact
to the
that they are being weaponized. But I think your support of Trump is deeper than you're acknowledging. You keep saying, I don't like Trump. I don't like Trump. How can you compare Trump with freedom fighters against the police?
I'm not comparing. I'm not comparing that. I'm saying that
you are. You
I'm saying no. I'm not saying. I'm not.
Of course, they're going to use it against anybody who.
It's the government. Okay. That's amazing that you don't see this. It is unbelievable that you don't see this. This is such a loser for you.
We had this opportunity to show the deep differences, very deep differences, though. But you do what you got to do, and I'm doing what I got to do, and I learn from you. And I hope you can learn a little bit from me, but we shall see.
The biggest story of my lifetime, if it wasn't Russiagate, which led directly to the Ukraine war. And I said it was going to in 2017 when they did this. And I told everybody at the Young Turks, they're going to use this to start a war. They're going to use this. And they did. And so here we are. And so what I want to the second biggest story is probably.
I just don't know if I would have even mentioned the Cop City part. I think because there was a lot of time spent on reading what happened with Rico and Cop City. And I don't know if I would have even said all that because that did take up a lot of time. But also Cornel West supports Stop Cop City. He's against Cop City. So I didn't understand. That really threw me a little bit. I'm gonna have to fast forward this a little bit because this is the part about, I can't play that part. Fuck. Anyway, that's the part about the pandemic. And I can talk about, actually I can play this part about the committee.
A variety of different voices that are clashing and the tensions are very real. I think there's no doubt that the pharmaceutical company has played a disproportionate role in shaping public policy. I think the kind of concerns that you and RFK Jr. and others have certainly are well grounded in that sense. On the other hand, we know there's been a whole host of vaccines in regard to other kinds of illnesses that are much more effective. The question becomes making sure, and one of the things I want to do, I want to have a truth commission that find out exactly what was the level of corruption that took place during these years, be able to see not just the text, we know the books are out there, but to have a truth commission so that we can see what voices were marginalized, what voices were pushed aside, and make sure it never happens again. I resonate with the spirit of what my green Black brothers and sisters are saying, but the Green Party itself does allow this kind of disagreement and so on. But I'll say.
So that part right there where he said, they were talking about the pandemic, he said he would like to have like a truth committee or whatever. You guys heard what he said there. It's funny because people actually were on Twitter earlier today saying that was never said.
Say this though, brother, I know I got to go, but I must say, you see, this is where you and I do in some ways live in different worlds, because as crucial and as important as the issue of vaccines and the COVID situation was, when you say that's probably the most important issue in your lifetime or in the last 25 or 30 years, in light of all the wars, in light of what Palestinians are going through, in light of what workers are going through, 63% of them are living paycheck to paycheck, in terms of all the vicious attacks of the police and the murders and so forth,
this is painful for me. This is painful because I feel like, again, I told you guys from the very beginning of the interview, I felt like the energy was just off. And I don't know. I know some of you said you were sad and your feelings were hurt and stuff like that, but I just feel like it feels so tense to me. Between like this conversation between the two of them, it feels really tense.
This vaccine issue is the most important thing. I say, okay, that's my dear brother Jimmy. He's got a right to raise his voice. I'm not going to in any way push it away, but I just live in a different world. As important as vaccines have been, if I had another chance, I'd be leaning much more with the Black caucus. But when I think of the weightiest issues, vaccines does not come immediately to mind. It just doesn't. That's the kind of world we live in, brother.
Okay.
So this goes back to the single issue voter thing, right? Like everybody has their one, or not everybody, but some people have like a one issue that is really important to them. So Jimmy has an issue that's important to him. Cornel West has issues that's important to him. And I think that I have to play the whole thing, but basically what Jimmy ends up bringing up was how the Black businesses were affected because of the pandemic and stuff like that, how Black businesses suffered the most and stuff like that. Now, I will say this. I don't agree with the title. I don't agree with Cornel West does 45-minute commercial for Joe Biden. I thought that was a bit extreme. But I will also say, I want to show you something, because I think this needs to be shown to people, especially if you haven't seen this on this channel before. When I tell you that some of the laws and policies that have been implemented in this country towards Black people ended up affecting poor white people too. This is why I cannot sit up here and say you can only talk about class. You can only talk about race. Race is class and class is race. And everybody needs to see this example in reference to health care, because I want to show you why we don't have universal health care in this country. Tom Hartman actually called this out long ago. Listen to this.
White people, watch this video and I'll be right back.
He published a book called Race, Tendencies, and Traits of the American Negro, in which he lays out all the numbers, and then he concludes that if we simply avoided allowing Black people to have any access to health care, that within 2 or 3 generations, the whole race would die out, and that would solve the race problem in America. When Teddy Roosevelt, 1912, proposed a national health care system, people said no because Black people will get it. When Franklin Roosevelt proposed a national health care system, it was the same thing. We don't want Black people to get it. When Truman tried it in 47, same thing. Don't want Black people to get it. We have to figure out a way to keep Black people from using Medicare. And the way that they came up with was to have a 20% hole, a gap in Medicare, so that you had to pay 20% of your doctor's bill and your hospital bill, and that would discourage poor Black people from showing up at the hospitals. Nearly 100% of the reason why the United States is the only country in the world that doesn't define healthcare as a right is because of racism.
But see, this is the part that people need to really hear. Don't allow yourself to be so caught up with the personalities and the drama that you miss the message. So here is universal health care not implemented in this country, mainly because they didn't want Black people to have health care, guys. But by implementing that decision, that actually hurt poor white people and poor working class people, poor white people and working class white people too. Let me continue.
Just a book called Race, Tendencies, and Traits of the American Negro.
How many times do I have to say this? Racism is a detriment to you white folks, poor white folks especially. Because of racism, you poor white folks can't even get good health care, because they thought if they could deny health care to Black people that we would have been eradicated a long time ago. But hey, we still here, and they have not changed the rules. How crazy is that? Even with Social Security, you have to pay 20% because of racism. We keep telling you, BIPOC keep telling you, Black people keep telling you, it is not us that makes your life suck. It is those racist politicians and their racist legislation that they think that's going to harm us, but harms you at the same time. And they don't care if it harms you. They don't give a shit. And then you continue to vote against your own interests. All because a bunch of rich white people told y'all to hate Black people because Black people are doing stuff to you as a whole. And we're not, because we don't control shit. We don't control the healthcare system. We don't control Social Security. We don't control your wages. We don't control shit. But they continue to tell you that it's us. So you turn your focus on us and harass the shit out of us for no fucking reason, when we have no power to affect your life as a whole community. Pay attention.
So that's probably the best example that people need to hear. And it's happened time and time again. It's not the first time that it's happened in this country. It's happened time and time again. So when you say, no, don't talk about race, let's not focus there, you do realize that some of these racist policy end up fucking your life over too, right? Now, for the people who continue to tell me that the Black Panthers worked with white supremacists, I don't know how many times I have to explain this on this channel. You guys continue listening to who you think makes you feel good, but I'm here to tell you the truth. And the truth is this: the Black Panthers did not work with the Young Patriots until they denounced racism. And after that happened, some people left the Young Patriots because they did not want to do the coalition and they did not want to denounce racism. Some people left the Black Panthers because they didn't want to work with a white group. It was not all roses. It's not all bells and whistles around here. And people, when you tell the story, you need to tell the truth. Now, here's a gentleman here. This is Revolution Podcast. Listen to this.
Fred nevertheless worked with them, organized with them, but not around accepting white nationalism.
Thank you.
When you hear they talk, they didn't say, well, our cause is the same as Fred's. They said, Fred's fighting police brutality. Fred's fighting for better housing for us. Fred's fighting for people in the community having power. And so we'll join that, not under the idea of being supremacist. Actually, the leader, one of the leaders of the Young Patriots, just did a recent thing. And he said on this podcast, he said, when Fred Hampton came to the Young Patriots, we said to him, what do you need from us, a white group that's powerless? Not like, and so, so I think they understood that they supported Black liberation. They supported a egalitarian society and the opposite of a white supremacist.
And that's the part that people need to hear. That's the part that's also often left out. When they had that coalition with the Young Patriots in turn supported Black liberation. So everybody want to use this example of the Black Panthers and talk about the Rainbow Coalition, but they always leave that part out. Some of you don't want to be uncomfortable. I'm not here to make you comfortable. I'm here to keep it real with you. And that's not everybody cup of tea. And I can tell some of you that are tuned in that obviously ain't never been on here before. Stop focusing on personalities and focus on policies and focus on organizing within your community and helping your people. And two, there is no hero. Nobody is coming to save you. That's why some of you already sad now. I woke up, first thing I saw this morning, people, I'm crying. I'm in tears. It's all over. It's the end of the world. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Because you put all of your eggs in one basket, hoping that one politician is going to come and save you and rescue you from this hellish life that we have in this country. And I've told you multiple times, there is no hero. You have to help yourself and people in your community, and you guys have to work together to help each other. Work together and create community gardens. Work together and do mutual aid. Cook for each other. If you know somebody, they running low on money and they need a babysitter, babysit for free. We have to help each other. The Black Panthers understood that. They knew that the government was not going to help them and save them. And as number of times that I've said this on this show, it was shocking to me this morning to make up and hear people say, I'm so sad and depressed now because Cornel West hurt my feelings and I don't know what to do now. Why are you banking on one person to change your fucking life? We did this before. Y'all ain't learned from Bernie. We learned from Obama.